So DOGE, let's talk about DOGE for a minute. Okay, DOGE, led by Elon Musk, came in, slashed a lot of people, slashed a lot of maybe spending. I don't know, but from your experience, is the waste that DOGE found really stuff that Washington insiders have always known about and just ignored, or was it some meaningful discoveries, and did it really make a difference?
Well, I think both. I think the insiders in Washington knew about it, and I think it was a meaningful discovery. And yes, it makes a difference. I think that the idea of government constantly looking at itself is an idea that's been around for decades. We have inspector generals in every agency that are there to find waste, fraud, and abuse, and yet they find it, and Congress does nothing about those wasteful programs. Again, if we had 6 years, I could give you examples of what's going on. But the federal government owns, I think it's like 47,000 vacant buildings around the world, vacant buildings, and yet there's no pressure from Congress to say sell these buildings before we give you more money for a new building or a new program. The Department of Defense hasn't passed its own audit. The audit that the Department of Defense does on itself, it hasn't passed for decades. They don't even know how many people work for them, and they don't know where all the money goes. And yet, what do? We just keep increasing the amount of money for the Department of Defense. And every agency has that. So the idea of DOGE is a great idea. It's a necessary idea. And I think it's really something that we need to make permanent.
Do you see with DOGE, and at least with Trump's, cabinet heads really taking an aggressive stance at eliminating some positions and trying to cut back on things? Does it make you hopeful? Does it give you more hope maybe than it did a couple of years ago, or not, that things might have a chance to turn around?
Well, on the one hand, you pass the big beautiful bill, and on the other hand, you have DOGE. And so they're sort of offsetting, although the big beautiful bill spent a lot more than DOGE saved. But yes, I'm hopeful that at some point Republicans get back to what we did before. Before I got into Congress, Speaker Boehner had an agreement with President Obama that if they couldn't come to a budget agreement, that there would be caps on spending. And those spending caps, for the most part, worked. There were some workarounds that they cheated on some of the caps, but for the most part, we need to have spending caps in government. And if you have spending caps and you have DOGE and you have really emboldened inspector generals, you'll be able to deal with that side of the budget crisis.
If as you look back at your time in Congress and you say to yourself, you learn a lot and you say, I wish I could have done that, or I wish there was a mechanism to do that. What is a structural thing? What's maybe one structural thing Ken Buck would change in the federal government and how it spends money? One rule, one process, one law, whatever it may be, that could really make a difference. What would that be?
I think we just talked about it. If you have a budget cap, instead of saying, okay, we're going to pass A and B, you've got to pass A or B, or a part of A and a part of B. But you can't have unlimited spending and then expect individuals to live within a budget or to live within their means. And so we have to recognize how much money we take in. So the real issue is to tell members of Congress, you can run for 3 terms, you can run for 4 terms. But if this Congress as a whole doesn't reduce the national debt within those 3 terms, you can't run for re-election. And hold people accountable in incentives that politicians understand. They don't understand the incentive when they go back to their district. One person out of 400 at a town hall meeting stands up and says, oh, I'm upset about the debt. The other 399 want more funding for various programs. So the incentive for a politician is a term limit, and that's what's going to get politicians' attention.
I worry that, I agree with you. When pressure comes from the grassroots, that seems to really be what works the most, right? But how do we explain to people, how do we get people worried again about the debt and the deficit and the spending, the out of control spending? How do we make the average family, the average small business, how do we make them worry about that, Ken?
Well, I've started Americans for Good Government, and we are out as much as we can trying to make this an issue in this election cycle. And we will continue to publicize it. But it really takes responsible individuals in the media, responsible individuals who are in academia, and that's almost an oxymoron, but responsible individuals who are out, maybe former government officials, giving voice to these concerns. There are some economists, but for the most part, they're ignored because people don't even know what $1 trillion is. I wouldn't recognize if you put $1 trillion in whatever on a football field, I wouldn't know that it was $1 trillion. So it's very difficult to fathom some of these concepts. But we do know that when the national debt and the spending on the national debt exceeds the spending on defense spending, that is a trigger, and that is a sign that an empire, an economy is going under. And that has happened now in the U.S., and we should be very concerned about it.
Absolutely. Well, Ken, thank you so much. Ken, anything else you want to add today before we wrap up?
I don't. I just want to thank you for doing this podcast with me, and thank Americans for Good Government for hosting this. And I just hope people hear and they know how to get a hold of us.
That's great. I'm excited about it. I look forward to doing this again. We'll take this issue up again sometime in the near future. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you again on another edition of Balls and Strikes.